Hello, and welcome back to Buzby Gaming. I'm Tony, and today we're going to talk about two games that were released in the late 90s. One for the PS1 and one for the N64, and that is Road Rash 3D and Road Rash 64. Now, these games are comparable for a few reasons, but first, let's just look back on a little bit of history up to this point. And as a little bit of a disclaimer, I'm really sorry if you like Road Rash Jailbreak. I'm not going to feature that in this video. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but I'm actually planning on doing a full video on Jailbreak at a later date. But that being said, I want to start back in 1991 on the Sega Genesis is when the very first Road Rash came out. It took place in California, and the tracks just got progressively longer and longer. I'm unsure, because I'm doing this video off memory, if there was two-player mode. I believe there was for all these games, but it was kind of like rudimentary. And I know, speaking of rudimentary, there was like there's lesser versions for the Game Boy and the Game Gear and things like that. The original Road Rash, as I said, came out on the Sega Genesis, but that wasn't always the case. There was a discussion that EA was having with Nintendo to make a Super Nintendo version. I don't think it even got off the ground. Maybe it started early development, but obviously it never released. That brings us to Road Rash 2. That was released in 1992, again for the Sega Genesis. The sequel took the same engine, the same sprites, and just added a little bit more content, but it kind of shortened the game. It's actually less than half the length of the game, but there is a full split-screen co-op multiplayer mode. There is like a dual mode called Mano a Mano. The race takes place throughout the entire United States. Well, not the entire United States. That'd be pretty impressive. But it takes place in like Alaska, Hawaii, Tennessee, Arizona, and fucking Vermont, of all places. I mean, who goes, hey, you know what? I want to have this really violent street race where we can use clubs and chains and shit. And you know where I want to have that race? Vermont. What the fuck? But anyway, this increased the number of bikes to 15. They were separated into three classes, with the later class having the ability to have nitro boost. Speaking of nitro boost, I don't know if it was 2 or 3, because again, I'm doing this off of memory, but my brother used to always he got this bike called the Wild Thing, and that bike was so it was way overpowered. You couldn't control the damn thing unless you were like an expert hand-eye movement, hand-eye coordinated person, and even then, you're probably going to screw up. And this is back when these versions of Road Rash, if you hit something, your guy took off flying way down the road. And on the Wild Thing, you literally, I think, was actually in one of the maps I was playing with my brother. He crashed about halfway through the map, and his guy flew off the bike and skidded across the ground so far he actually crossed the fucking finish line. So there wasn't no blinking, you know, like in Road Rash 3D and N64, you hit something, your character blinks and you go right back to where you were. You're back on your bike automatically and you go. The Sega Genesis version, they didn't have any of that. Your dude had to literally get up after being in the car wreck, run back to his bike, and hope to God it wasn't damaged, because if it was, you get a nice little shock and a game over screen. So you sit there, you may run after your bike for 30 seconds or a minute, only to reach down and grab it, and it shocks the shit out of you, and you know, game over. And there was a little funny cutscene, again in 2 or 3, I'm gonna have to find it, where an ambulance comes and they pick up. You think they're gonna pick up the guy, but they end up picking up the bike and they leave a fucking dude lying on the side of the road. I think that shit was hilarious, you know. I can't remember, because 2 and 3, like, they both came out, I was young, and we swapped back and forth between the two of them. Road Rash 3 that came out in 1995. That one actually didn't take place in the United States at all. It was like Brazil, the UK. I want to say it was like Kenya, Australia, and Japan. I can't remember. I might be missing one of them. But it was like kind of like a globe-trotting thing. And it was actually the first game where you could actually hold multiple weapons and they carried with you through to the next race. I think it was the same amount of bikes, but you can actually like upgrade them. Like you could put like stronger engines and things like that to make them go a little faster. But it was still the same basic game. And then that brings us to 1998, which was the release of the Road Rash 3D. That was actually the first game not released on a Sega Genesis. I'm joking. The game was mostly not based on sprites, which was in the past. It was just a flat image that would, change depending on, how much pressure you put on left or right, or whether you got an accident or not. So instead of a 2D image, it was just like the name implied, it was 3D. One thing that it actually featured, which I thought was kind of cool, was actual full motion videos, or FMVs. I don't know which one you're more familiar with. It actually had full voice acting. The race courses were actually like pieced together. So if you glitch through the map or glitch the checkpoints or use Game Shark, you could actually drive through the entirety of the map. It was all just one big island. EA, for some reason or another, decided to place less emphasis on combat and more emphasis on racing, because God knows one thing that the PS1 is short on is racing games. And that brings us to the year of our Lord, 1999. Road Rash 64 was released on the N64, and Electronic Arts didn't publish it. The rights were actually, or the intellectual property, whatever word you want to use, were given to THQ. And ironically, a former EA employee, Don Traeger, he's actually the one that developed this game. So it was kind of almost like an ultimate FU to his former employer. They actually had this really weird and crazy idea to put combat at the front and center of a Road Rash game. And it was successful. I can't believe that was the idea that came into somebody's head. But still, it was very much a racing game. One thing that was kind of nice was the camera. That's the one thing I could say was different, and this was reflected with the play styles. EA's version on the 3D on the PS1, the camera was right up on the bumper, and it kind of limited your view to the left and right. And, things like pedestrians and obstacles like that would kind of pop up on you. And it would just, it made it like very difficult to play. It was definitely aimed more at being a racer than it was a combat racer. Whereas with the N64, the camera is back a little bit and it gives you a wider view to your left and right. And the AI is way aggressive on the N64 version. They are more interested in beating you up than beating you in a race, whereas on the PS1 the AI is more concerned with getting in first and staying in first. The N64, the AI just like they beat the crap out of you. They don't care. The police don't even care. And it's like the police don't even go after the CPU. It's like the police and the CPU are on the same side, and that is everybody versus you. And that really makes for an interesting gameplay. And what I mean by that is that you could be racing. Yeah, you're trying to survive to the end. That's really all the point you got to do. That's really the only point of the game, is to survive to the end and to get first place if you are lucky enough to do that. This game also featured, really crazy fast bikes, and you can go like to the point. One thing I really liked doing was there was like these embankments on the N64 version, and I hit them with these turbo bikes, and you'd fly. You'd just fly through the damn sky like it was a bike from GTA 5 or something. And it was really interesting and fun to play. And now, if anyone says that these games are not comparable, I say, well, listen here, Sticky Buns, because you are wrong. Here's why. Both games have a very similar soundtrack. And not to mention the fact that over 80% of the sound effects that were used in the PS1 version are ended up being used in the N64 version. Now, obviously, they look different, and that is because, well, they were developed by two different teams at two different companies. Now, EA, like I said, were aiming more toward a racer game rather than a combat racer. And the opposite was, for the N64. But if you actually zoom in a little bit on the PS1 version, you can see the pixels. You can see all the jagged edges and the pop-ins and things like that. And on the N64 version, yeah, it has jagged edges because, these are both in the early 3D consoles. But the really cool thing is that the N64 version doesn't really have that many pop-ups. Yeah, they're still here and there, but the biggest overall thing, the biggest difference I can tell you is the visibility of the map. Yeah, you have more visibility of the map on the PS1, but it pops in. Like, you get to a certain point where if you're looking off in the distance, I don't know why you would be, you're not trying to take in the scenic vista of the map you're on, you're just racing. And that's where N64 kind of reins it in. You get more of a fog of war. And the great thing about the fog of war is that it's just far enough away that it's not distracting, and it hides all the pop-in textures so they're not distracting because you're not looking that far ahead. Your attention is right where it needs to be, where the action is. And just enough of the map is revealed to keep you in the race. And honestly, I think, it was a creative choice because the N64 is a little bit more limited compared to the PS1 graphically. But I gotta say, I think I'm gonna get a lot of hate comments for this because I'm about to hurt some feelings. Here it goes. The N64 version was better. And I'm gonna insert a disclaimer right here. This is just my opinion. This is not a fact. I'm not going to throw this in someone's face. Again, I grew up with an N64, so maybe I'm looking at this through a little bit of a nostalgia filter. But as a video game player, a modern video game player, I can tell you visually appealing wise, it would be easier to get somebody who was, say, like a teenager to sit down and play Road Rash 64 than it would be to get them to play Road Rash 3D, just from the visual of the game and the gameplay aspect of it. Some people will say that, well, the PS1 had the full FMVs and the voiceover and the story and all that, and the N64 just had, text, and you got to choose your racer, and away you went on the race. And honestly, if you were playing a Road Rash game for the story, it's kind of like watching porn to listen to the music. It doesn't really make any sense. You're in it to race and kick somebody's ass, trying to get to the finish line first. That's the whole point of the game. If I could say one thing right now to EA Games, they haven't made a Road Rash game in 20 years. This is a franchise that they have the rights to, that they have refused to touch for the last 20 years. And I don't know if it's because this former employee of EA went to a different company and actually made a better Road Rash game, and they made a better game than EA did. So they made one other game after this, which is obviously Jailbreak, and that was a fun game, and like I said, I'm going to do a video featuring that in the future. But I guess the one thing I would say to EA higher-ups, if I could get myself in a room with them, I'd be like, this is a beloved retro franchise. One that has a storied history, one that has many fans, and it's a franchise that you would refuse to touch for the last 20 years. Why don't you sell off the rights to it to THQ Nordic? They did a great job with Wreckfest. They know what they're doing. If you're going to sit on a franchise that people love and want to see a new game of. And if you think I'm wrong, there's Road Redemption and the other game that is kind of like Road Rash that nobody likes. And people flock to those games, and the first thing they said is, this is kind of like Road Rash, but not really. The desire to have a new Road Rash game is there. The fans want it. EA seems to be wanting to line their pocketbooks with DLCs and loot crates and things like that, and half-assed Mass Effect games. Just either make a new Road Rash or cooperate again with THQ and make a new version of Road Rash for a new generation. Either that, or at least upscale the older ones or something. Do a HD remake or something. Do something with the damn franchise. You've been sitting on it for 20 fucking years, EA. Do something. Do something with the damn franchise, will you? Please? Anyway, if you like content like this, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And that's all I have for you today. Take care, stay safe, and have a good weekend, and we will see you in the next one.